After intending to join the struggle for succession, the fifth prince, Ning Zheng, politely declined Consort Bian's kind offer to adopt him as her son. Although Consort Bian felt a sense of regret after understanding Ning Zheng's true intentions, she had come to terms with it. That evening, after seeing Ning Zheng off, Consort Bian went to the sovereign's bedchamber. Upon hearing her account, Ning Yuanxian was utterly shocked. What? Ning Zheng actually refused your proposal? Could it be that scoundrel Shen Lang who instigated him? Consort Bian shook her head. Impossible. I rather think this is what Jing'er truly wants. However, your majesty can rest assured. It is an ironclad rule that the imperial harem must not interfere in politics. I will absolutely not get involved in the struggle for succession. But if anyone dares to bully Jing'er again in the future, I will certainly not stand by and watch. Hearing this, Ning Yuanxian sighed and said jokingly, fine. Since it's like this, I'll find an excuse to release him, lest my beloved consort says I've bullied him. The next day, the Court of Judicial Review and the Clan Affairs Court jointly tried the case of the fifth prince, Ning Zheng, murdering a court official. After a 3-hour trial, the truth came to light. It was ultimately determined that an official from the Court of Judicial Review had acted on a personal grudge, attempting to murder the unborn child of Shen Lang's concubine, and Ning Zheng had been forced to kill in order to save the child. Although there were mitigating circumstances and the act was understandable, his methods were deemed too extreme, and he was sentenced to 30 lashes. The punishment was then carried out publicly according to procedure. Ning Zheng received 30 lashes in front of everyone until he fainted. 3 days later, the sovereign issued a decree enfeoffing Ning Zheng as the Marquis of Changping, permitting him to establish his own administration and recruit a private army of 1,000 men, and also bestowing upon him the former mansion of the Marquis of Distant Guard. Upon receiving the decree, Ning Zheng was already sobbing uncontrollably. After all, his brothers had long been made dukes and marquises, and only today did he finally receive a marquisate of his own. Immediately after, without choosing any auspicious date, Ning Zheng moved with his family into the newly appointed Marquis of Changping's mansion the very next day. However, even though he had been made a marquis, only Zhang Sun, the son of Zhang Chong, came to congratulate him on his move. Not long after, Shen Lang entered the palace and formally resigned from his position as the city lord of Distant Guard to the sovereign, becoming the chief of staff of the Marquis of Changping's mansion. This move also sent a clear signal to the outside world. He was now completely tied to Ning Zheng, and everyone was shocked by Shen Lang's choice, giving up a perfectly good position as a city lord to follow a worthless prince. Listening to the gossip on the streets, Shen Lang couldn't help but smile faintly. What do you people know? With my support, Ning Zheng is destined to become the crown prince in the future. He then turned and walked towards the Marquis of Changping's mansion. They had now taken the first step by establishing an administration for the fifth prince. Although the sovereign had been stingy and hadn't provided them with a single soldier, this was exactly what he wanted. Shen Lang could now recruit capable people himself. He put his plan into action immediately. The next morning, he personally sat in the courtyard of the Imperial Academy and began recruiting subordinate officials. The students in the courtyard saw this and jeered. Who would go and be a subordinate official for a useless prince? Wouldn't that mean sitting on a cold bench for a lifetime, with one's future completely ruined? A few days later, seeing no progress, he moved the recruitment platform to the main Vermilion Bird Avenue. But while the crowd was larger here, the gossip was even more intense. Onlookers were all discussing, is this Shen Lang out of his mind? A chief clerk needs to be a provincial graduate, and the leader of 100 households and leader of 1,000 households commanders must be metropolitan military graduates and provincial military graduates. But if someone really had such credentials, who would go and serve an unfavored prince as a subordinate? The days passed one by one, the first day, the second, the third, until the 8th day. As the crowd of onlookers dwindled, Shen Lang still hadn't recruited anyone. However, on the 9th day, the words on the recruitment banner behind him stunned everyone. It read, recruiting ministers who follow the dragon, recruiting ministers of the uncrowned residents. This move left the entire capital city utterly shocked. This Shen Lang was truly insane. Did he not know what ministers who follow the dragon and ministers of the uncrowned residents meant? Only the residence of a sovereign before his accession could be called an uncrowned residence. At that moment, someone couldn't resist walking up and asking, Shen Lang, by writing such a slogan, are you implying that the fifth prince, Ning Zheng, intends to join the struggle for succession? Shen Lang's lips curled into a smile upon hearing this. Yes, you guessed correctly. Our fifth prince is indeed joining the struggle for succession. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire crowd fell silent. People exchanged glances, and after a moment, a thunderous wave of laughter erupted. Ning Zheng, that ugly, stuttering, worthless prince, wants to fight for the throne? This is the biggest joke of the year. The story spread like wildfire, and within half a day, Shen Lang and Ning Zheng became the laughingstock of the entire capital city. From the second day on, not only did the Imperial Academy and all the military schools forbid him from recruiting, but they also hung signs at their gates that read, Shen Lang is not permitted to enter. At this point, he simply set up his recruitment station at the busiest intersection of Vermilion Bird Avenue and Black Warrior Avenue. However, it was all in vain. No matter how loudly Big Fool shouted, not even a ghost was willing to join them. People would only point and whisper from a distance. After all, everyone knew how powerful the third prince and the crown prince were, while the fifth prince didn't even have a single decent subordinate. Anyone who got involved would likely not even know how they died in the future. Meanwhile, the matter reached the royal palace. When Ning Yuanxian heard the news, he was about to explode with anger. Shenlang, have you no shame? You and Ningjing may not be afraid of losing face, but I'm losing all of mine because of you. Are you afraid the world doesn't know about the succession struggle in my kingdom? Seeing the sovereign's fury, Li Ji broke into a cold sweat for Shenlang and hurriedly stepped forward. Your Majesty, how about this old servant sends someone to arrest Shenlang and bring him back right now? Hearing this, Ning Yuanxian suppressed his anger and said through gritted teeth, I'll tolerate him one more time. After all, I still owe that little rascal 2 favors. Beside him, Consort Bien sighed softly. Your Majesty, if it really comes to it, why don't you just assign all the necessary personnel to Xing'er? That way, Shenlang won't be out there making a fool of himself and embarrassing you every day. Ning Yuanxian shook his head helplessly. It's too late. If I had assigned the personnel to Ningjing from the beginning, no one would have dared to say anything. But now, he's been pushed into the spotlight. If I send people over now, they would surely feign illness or flee to save their own lives rather than go. Forget it. Let him be. The day I repay my debts to this little menace, I'll be sure to teach him a proper lesson. At these words, Consort Bien couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. Their Majesty had always been impatient with people, yet he could tolerate Shenlang to this extent. This special favor added an interesting twist to their relationship. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, a month had passed, yet Shenlang's recruitment efforts remained fruitless. It wasn't until the 31st day that things finally took a turn. At that moment, Shenlang was reading a book out of boredom when a lazy and arrogant voice suddenly reached his ears. Are you recruiting people here? Thinking it was just another person coming to jest, Shenlang simply grunted in acknowledgement without looking up. Unexpectedly, the voice continued, You're lucky today. I originally had no intention of concerning myself with worldly affairs, but if your pay is high enough, I might consider it. Such an arrogant tone immediately caught Shenlang's attention, but when he looked up, he was shocked by the person before him. The man was dressed in tattered clothes covered in stains and patches, with long, greasy, and messy hair that emitted a foul stench, even attracting a few flies that buzzed around him. Wasn't this just a beggar? Seeing this, Shenlang calmly took out a handkerchief, sprayed it with disinfectant, and, covering his nose, asked, Sir, to be able to speak so boldly while dressed like this, I am truly impressed. May I ask where you are from? The beggar replied, Where my heart is at ease, that is my home. Shenlang asked again, May I ask, Sir, what are your academic achievements? The beggar calmly replied, Fame and fortune are but fleeting clouds. Then may I ask if you have any family? Alone and without a care in the world, is that not a joy? With that, Shenlang understood. This fellow was a classic drifter with no ties, no job, and no home. He was just about to raise his hand to have the man driven away when, in the next second, the beggar, quick as lightning, shot out a filthy hand and grabbed him firmly. Then, with a determined gaze, he said to Shenlang, Young Master Shen, for us to meet in this vast sea of people, is this not a kind of fate? As the saying goes, 1,000-mile horse is common, but a discerning judge of talent is not. Surely you cannot bear to see my unparalleled talent go to waste without a place to belong? Shenlang, with a look of disgust, pulled his hand back and asked, Dare I ask what skills you possess? The beggar tossed his hair and said arrogantly, I observe the heavens above and examine the earth below. My mind holds 10,000 strategies, securing victory from 1,000 miles away. I compare myself to the wise and virtuous, laughing at the romantic world. I do not concern myself with trivial matters, but only act to shape the grand scheme of things. Shenlang now understood that this fellow's greatest skill was boasting, perhaps even better than himself. Just as he was thinking, a group of people approached, jeering, Isn't that Madman Lan? This is interesting. 2 madmen have found each other. It should be said that a madman and a fool are about to team up. Shenlang had long become immune to such words, but he was curious as to why this homeless man was so famous. At that moment, Ning Zheng's trusted eunuch came over and explained, This Madman Lan is a beggar by trade, and before that, a fortune teller. However, he never seemed to get a single prediction right. Once, while telling a man's fortune, he took advantage of the client's wife and had his hands broken in the street. After that, seeing he could no longer make a living from fortune telling, he simply became a full-time beggar. But this guy is incredibly lecherous. Any money he gets, he spends on women. He also hates bathing and always runs up debts, so even the lowest-ranking prostitutes refuse to see him. Just as Shenlang was getting engrossed in the story, Madman Lan's face suddenly appeared close to his, saying, Young Master Shen, don't hesitate. If you miss out on a talent like me, it will affect your path to dominance. However, before he could finish his sentence, a large, stout woman rushed up and sent Madman Lan flying with a single slap. Before he could recover, the fat woman leaped up and sat directly on top of him. With a few cracking sounds of breaking bones, Madman Lan's pig-like screams echoed through the air. However, the fat woman paid no mind to whether he lived or died, roaring, You old scoundrel, I finally caught you. You owe me 5 silver coins, and today I'm going to kill you. At this moment, the half-dead Madman Lan managed to gasp for a breath and said, Jiao Jiao, we were clearly in love. How could you start talking about money with me now? The words had barely left his mouth when the fat woman's slaps rained down on his face, left left and right as she cursed. Who's in love with you? Even if you don't have a mirror, you have a puddle of urine to look at. Cut the crap and pay up. After dozens of slaps, the tired fat woman stood up and glared at the blood-covered Madman Lan. I'll give you 10 more days. If you still don't have the money, I'll tear you apart and feed you to the dogs. With that, she turned and strode away without a backward glance. Shenlang and the others watched, stunned. Could this Madman Lan, beaten so severely, actually be in mortal danger? To their surprise, the next moment, the man staggered to his feet, stretched his limbs, and grinned. Good luck this time, my ribs weren't broken. Then he turned to Shenlang and said, Young Master Shen, you saw that. If you're considering hiring me, you'll have to advance me 5 silver coins to cover this emotional damage fee. Hearing this, Shenlang's mouth twitched. Where did this guy get the audacity to assume he would be hired? But could he really be fine after such a beating? Driven by curiosity, Shenlang secretly activated his X-ray vision and scanned Madman Lan. After seeing the results, he was first startled, then instantly rushed to his side and asked urgently, Madman Lan, what is 3,895 multiplied by 15,243? Madman Lan was taken aback and blurted out, 59371485. As soon as the words were out, Shenlang exclaimed with excitement, Congratulations, you're hired. Madman Lan was not surprised at being successfully recruited. He wiped the blood from his face, stood up, and smiled. A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. A wise minister chooses a lord to serve. A gentleman will die for one who truly knows him. From this day forward, I, Lan, will devote myself completely until death. Hearing this, Shenlang, with a speechless expression, took out 5 silver coins and tossed them to him, saying, all right, hurry up and go pay back that emotional damage fee you owe. Madman Lan caught the silver coins. His face lit up with excitement, and he turned to chase after the fat woman. Jiao, I have money now. When can we rekindle our love? Hearing the shouts behind her, the fat woman stopped, snatched the money pouch from him, and said contemptuously, Madman Lan, I advise you not to waste your money. You're terrible in that department. I even feel a little guilty taking your money. Hearing the fat woman's sarcastic words, Madman Lan wilted like a frostbitten eggplant. He walked back to Shenlang dejectedly and bowed. Shenlang nodded and announced, from this day forward, you, Madman Lan, are the chief clerk of the Marquis of Chongping's mansion, a 7th-rank official position. Before his voice had faded, a wave of discontent surged from the crowd. Are you kidding? Shenlang is making a beggar a 7th-rank court official? Doesn't this mean any one of us could become a prime minister? Even Ning Zheng's trusted eunuch couldn't bear to watch any longer. Young Master Shen, although it's difficult for us to recruit people, this man, he can't even be considered a crooked melon or a crack date. Shenlang smiled. Elder, don't be anxious. We are looking for unconventional talent. At these words, the old eunuch became even more anxious. No, young Master Shen, you can bring a mule or a donkey to a horse race, but you can't bring a dung beetle. Besides, didn't you say that this position of chief clerk requires at least a provincial graduate degree? Hearing this, Shenlang chuckled lightly. That's right, but I never said the current chief clerk has to be a provincial graduate. If he has outstanding ability, he can pass the provincial exam in the next session, or the one after that, even if it takes 10 years. With that, he walked up to Madman Lan, patted him on the shoulder, and said, Lord Chief Clerk, I believe that with your social circle, you must know many other talented individuals like yourself who have yet to be discovered. I wonder if you could introduce some of them to me. Hearing this, Madman Lan suddenly became serious. Young Master Shen, you've come to the right person. The number of highly talented people I've met in my life is like the Crucian carp crossing the river. It's just that they have untamed personalities, find it hard to fit into the secular world, and lack a discerning eye to recognize their worth. Shenlang quickly interrupted him. Lord Chief Clerk, no need to say more. Please trouble yourself to find these talented individuals, and I will be sure to select the best among them. However, at that moment, Madman Lan suddenly held up a finger and said, let me be clear beforehand. These are all individuals of such great talent that you would be hard-pressed to find them anywhere else in the world. I will need an introduction fee of 1 silver coin per person. After hearing this, Shenlang agreed immediately. After the payment, the old eunuch beside him pouted and reluctantly handed over the money pouch. Madman Lan's face lit up with joy upon receiving the money. Young Master Shen, please wait here for a moment. I will go and bring the people to you right now. A quarter of an hour later, Madman Lan rushed to a dilapidated temple deep in the mountain forest. As soon as he entered, he shouted, someone wants to recruit us to be officials at a marquis mansion. We won't have to worry about food and drink anymore. As his voice fell, several beggars of various shapes and sizes, all in ragged clothes, lifted their confused and cloudy eyes to look at him. Madman Lan continued, as long as you're chosen, you'll start as at least a leader of 100 households officer in the mansion. In the future, with accomplishments, becoming a general or being infeft as a marquis or duke won't be just a dream. As soon as he finished speaking, half an hour later, Madman Lan led a group of staggering homeless men, walking with a swagger, running toward Shenlang's stall. Chief of Staff, look, I've brought everyone for you. As he approached, he enthusiastically introduced them. Take a look at these great talents with their extraordinary frames. Aren't they more than qualified to be the leader of 100 households officers of the mansion? At this moment, looking at the group of strangely shaped homeless countless men exuding a foul odor. Shenlang was completely stunned. After regaining his senses, he quickly took out his disinfectant and handkerchief and sprayed furiously, muttering to himself, "My heavens, where on earth did he find so many misfits?" While holding his nose, Shenlang quietly activated his X-ray vision and scanned them. Although their appearances were strange, they were indeed all gifted with extraordinary talents and immense potential. Truly great talents in their own right. At that moment, Madman Lan approached, seeking credit. "Chief of Staff, I didn't disappoint you, did I? They are all 1 in a million talents." Shenlang nodded in praise. "More than 1 in a million." Hearing this, Madman Lan immediately looked proud and said, "Then tell me, are they qualified to be the 5th Prince's leader of 100 households officers?" Shenlang nodded decisively. "Of course, they are." As his voice fell, Madman Lan immediately turned, waved his hand, and shouted, "Brothers, from today on, we all belong to the Marquis of Chongping's mansion, and you are the leader of 100 households officers of the mansion. Come, let us all pay our respects to Chief of Staff Shen." As his voice fell, the group of beggars tried to kneel and kowtow to Shenlang, but their bones were too severely deformed for them to kneel properly. Witnessing this scene, the onlookers could no longer laugh, all exclaiming in amazement, "Damn, am I crazy or is Shenlang crazy? A beggar can actually become an official in our great Yu kingdom?" However, Shenlang was completely unconcerned by these words and immediately shouted loudly, "My Marquis of Chongping's mansion has found several great talents today, and the recruitment is now officially over. Follow me back to the mansion to report to the 5th Highness." He then led the way, calling for everyone to follow, and strode towards the Marquis of Chongping's mansion. Seeing this, Ning Zhang's trusted eunuch collapsed to the ground in despair, cried out, "5th Highness, this old servant has failed you," then rolled his eyes and fainted completely. A moment later, inside the Marquis of Chongping's mansion, the beggars, upon seeing Ning Zhang, twisted their bodies and struck various bizarre poses to greet him. Ning Zhang's jaw nearly dropped when he saw the motley crew Shenlang had recruited. What is going on? Why would Shenlang recruit this group of strange people who can't even stand properly to be my subordinates? Does he have some other deeper meaning? At this moment, although he was full of doubts, he held absolute trust in Shenlang. Despite his discomfort, he forced himself to say, "Since you have all come, you are welcome here. You may all go and rest for now." However, as the group of beggars bowed to him again, Ning Zhang caught a glimpse of the disdainful looks from the nearby servants. Helplessly, he sighed, stood up, and said, "I will take you to your quarters." Half a moment later, when Ning Zhang led them into the rear courtyard, the group of beggars was instantly stunned by the magnificent and resplendent furnishings of the Marquis's mansion. They had been sleeping in drafty, dilapidated temples every day. Now, being here was like being in a paradise. At this moment, Ning Zhang pointed to a row of houses in the backyard and said, "You can each have a room there as you please. If you need anything, just let the servants know." Hearing this, Madman Lan bowed politely to him. "Thank you for your kindness, 5th Highness." Upon hearing Ning Zhang's words, the group of beggars behind him eagerly rushed towards the rooms. But just as they were about to reach them, little Bing, with her pregnant belly, suddenly stepped forward and shouted sternly, "All of you, stop right where you are. Everyone, go take a bath and scrub yourselves thoroughly with bamboo brushes. Shave all your hair off. If you bring in a single speck of dirt or one louse, I'll skin you alive." After speaking, she commanded those behind her, "Sister Wu Lai, take the other sisters and push them into the water. If any of them dare to not cooperate, beat them to death for me." As her voice fell, Wu Lai and the others, as if grabbing little chicks, carried the beggars one by one to the adjacent courtyard, stripped off their foul-smelling clothes, and began to scrub them. Unfortunately, the freshly boiled water was too hot, and instantly, the group let out blood-curdling screams like pigs being slaughtered. Not far away, Shenlang and Ning Zhang stood at the courtyard gate, watching the chaotic scene before them. Finally, Ning Zhang couldn't help but ask, "Shenlang, do you really intend to recruit them? Or do you have some other deeper meaning?" Shenlang shook his head. "I don't, Your Highness. These are the elites I spent a month carefully selecting." Ning Zhang was taken aback. A month of selection resulted in this motley crew? On second thought, finding even one such eccentric individual on a normal day would be rare, let alone a dozen at once. Perhaps they truly possess talents that we cannot see. Seeing Ning Zhang's unconcealable disappointment, Shenlang chuckled lightly. "Your Highness, do you trust me?" At these words, Ning Zhang replied without hesitation, "Of course, I trust you more than I trust myself." Upon hearing this, Shenlang said with a serious expression, "In that case, please believe, Your Highness, that they are truly great talents, 1 in 100,000. Even they themselves are not yet aware of their abilities. Among them, the only one who knows the truth is Madman Lan. The fact that he could spend over a decade gathering this group and, setting aside their abilities, willingly lead them to become the lowliest of beggars, suggests he must be hiding something." The news that Shenlang had recruited 11 homeless beggars to serve as officials under the 5th Prince Ning Zhang struck like a clap of thunder, instantly setting the entire capital abuzz. When the news reached the palace, it provoked an unprecedented storm of fury from the sovereign Ning Yuanxian, who immediately ordered Li Ji to personally drag Shenlang before him. At this moment, Ning Yuanxian pointed at Shenlang and berated him sternly. "Shenlang, what is the meaning of this? Are you blaming me for not providing Ning Zhang with enough men, so you found 11 beggars to humiliate me? Your previous recruitment efforts have already made me a laughingstock throughout throughout the land, and I never thought my tolerance would only encourage you to become even more audacious. You have truly disappointed me. Today, you must provide an explanation. I have already sent masters from the Blackwater platform to wait outside Ning Zheng's mansion. If there is no order to stop them within half an hour, they will rush in and execute all 11 beggars. And you, young Master Shen, will then pack your bags and get back to Mythical Turtle City for me. Hearing this, Shen Lang sighed and said, Your Majesty, please calm your anger. I believe that one should not judge people or matters by their appearance alone. I am willing to stake my life that these beggars are not mediocre men, but rare and great talents who will certainly not disappoint your Majesty in the future. I have heard that to celebrate our great use continuous victories in battle and to boost national morale, you have specially added a special imperial examination next month. I boldly request your Majesty to allow these 11 individuals to participate in the examination as well. At these words, the sovereign was so angry he laughed. Shen Lang, you want these dozen beggars to take the special imperial examination? Are you sure you're not joking with me? Seeing the sovereign trembling with anger, Shen Lang remained calm and said slowly, Your Majesty, the leader of this group of beggars, Madman Lan, is in his 30s this year. He has been wandering the world since his teenage years. Although he has never formally attended school, let alone taken any imperial examinations, my observations tell me he is indeed a man of great talent. There is still over a month until the provincial level special examination. If your Majesty can grant him the status of an Imperial Academy scholar and allow him to participate, I guarantee he will not only pass but also rank among the top. After hearing this, Ning Yuanxian's brows furrowed deeply. According to the Blackwater platform's spies, this Madman Lan had been a wanderer since childhood, surviving on scams and tricks. Such a person would be lucky to even pass the county level exam, let alone the provincial one. For Shen Lang to claim he could rank at the top and pass the provincial exam within a month was simply absurd. At this moment, Shen Lang continued, Your Majesty, as for the other 10 beggars, although they have never practiced martial arts and have physical disabilities, making their martial arts foundation essentially zero from the perspective of their meridians, they are all 1 in a million martial arts prodigies. With just over a month until the military examination, if I train them rigorously during this time, I can ensure that all of them pass and become military examination graduates. After listening to Shen Lang's absurd claims, the sovereign was thoroughly enraged and roared, Shen Lang, are you toying with me? Even ordinary talented individuals must study and train diligently for over a decade to have a chance at passing the military examination. Look at Zhang Ji, look at Lin Zhuo. Which one of them did not achieve their current military examination graduate status through immense hardship? Unexpectedly, just as the sovereign reached this point, Shen Lang interrupted him. I am willing to make a written military pledge. If, after 1 month, Madman Lan fails to pass the civil examination and the other 10 fail to pass the military examination, I will immediately return to Mythical Turtle City and never set foot in the capital again, and the matter of Prince Ning Zheng's bid for the throne will never be mentioned again. Shen Lang's words stunned the sovereign. He couldn't understand why Shen Lang valued these dozen strange individuals so much. One was a notorious swindler, and the others were disabled cripples. What extraordinary qualities did they possess that made Shen Lang go to such lengths to recruit them into the Marquis of Chongping's mansion? The sovereign stared at Shen Lang, silent for a long time, before asking through gritted teeth, Brat, are you sure you want to do this? Shen Lang bowed and said, Your Majesty, I, Shen Lang, have never made empty promises before you. Since I dare to make a military pledge before you now, I am certain I have the confidence to fulfill it. Upon hearing this, the sovereign slammed his hand on the table and said, Then I will trust you one more time. Write it now. Hearing this, Shen Lang stepped forward and, without hesitation, took up the brush and wrote out the military pledge. As he signed his name, his mind was clear. If Madman Lan could not place in the top 3 of the civil examination, and the other 10 failed to pass the military examination, then the entire plan to help the 5th prince seize the throne would be for naught. A moment later, Ning Yuanxian looked at the military pledge in his hand and said, Shen Lang, it's not too late to back out now. This pledge is right next to the candle flame. I can burn it on the spot and pretend nothing happened. You send those people away, and I will dispatch men to serve as the chief clerk and leader of 100 households officers in Ning Zheng's mansion. Hearing this, Shen Lang smiled. Thank you for your kindness, Your Majesty, but I am a person who enjoys creating miracles, especially miracles that others deem impossible. Hearing Shen Lang's confident words, Ning Yuanxian felt an unexpected flicker of anticipation. This brat Shen Lang is truly audacious. The civil and military imperial examinations of my Yu Kingdom are known for their strictness among the 3 kingdoms of Yu, Chu, and Wu, failing countless elite scholars every year. This time, I'd like to see what tricks this kid has up his sleeve to make this group of homeless beggars pass the examinations with high marks. However, the sovereign's expression turned serious as he said, Add another clause. If they fail the examination, I will have them all secretly executed. After all, you are the one causing the trouble, but it is my face that is being lost. Shen Lang winced but respectfully agreed. The sovereign then turned to Lian and said, Relay my decree. Grant the Marquis of Chongping's chief clerk, Madman Lan, the status of an Imperial Academy scholar and permit him to participate in the autumn special civil examination. Grant the the other 10 the status of military academy scholars to prepare for the military examination. As soon as the words were spoken, a cunning look appeared on Shenlang's face as he said, "Your Majesty, if I truly manage to create a miracle this time, shouldn't you offer some reward as encouragement?" Ning Yuanxian was taken aback, then raised an eyebrow. "Speak, what do you want?" A glint flashed in Shenlang's eyes as he smiled. "I humbly request your Majesty's permission to expand Prince Ning Zheng's private army to 2,000 men. Would that be possible?" At these words, the sovereign's teeth itched with anger. "I knew this little rascal had ill intentions. Only you, Shenlang, would dare to make such outrageous demands of me. Anyone else would have been dragged out and beaten to death long ago." Suppressing his anger, he pointed at Shenlang and said, "I promise you, when the time comes, you can choose the soldiers yourself. But if you fail, you will have to bear all the consequences yourself." Hearing the sovereign's promise, a slight smile appeared on Shenlang's lips. He knew his goal had been achieved. He then bowed respectfully and left the royal palace. Not long after Shenlang left, Ning Yuanxian seemed to snap back to his senses, a wave of regret surging through him. How could I have agreed to such an absurd condition from that little rascal? If those dozen beggars really fail the exam, I'll be a laughingstock across the entire nation. Damn you, Shenlang, you're simply toxic. After convincing the sovereign to allow Madman Lan and the other 10 homeless men to take the special examination, Shenlang rushed back to the Marquis of Changping's mansion without a moment's rest. Upon entering, he saw a completely transformed Madman Lan leading the other 10, still motley-looking individuals, to welcome him at the gate. Shenlang was first taken aback, then cleared his throat and said, "Madman Lan, you stay and follow me to the study. The rest of you can go and rest for now." A moment later, in the study, Shenlang spoke with a grave expression to Ning Zheng and Madman Lan. "Today, I have made a military pledge to His Majesty. In 1.5 months, Madman Lan, you will take the civil service examination, and the other 10 will take the military service examination. This time, not only must you all pass with high marks, but you, Madman Lan, must also place in the top 3. He paused, his tone becoming even more solemn. "If you succeed, your official positions will be secured, and His Majesty will grant the 5th Highness an additional 2,000 troops. But if you fail, everything we have planned will come to nothing, and you 11, including Madman Lan, will be secretly executed." As soon as these words were spoken, both men before him were utterly shocked. Madman Lan was so frightened his heart nearly stopped. "Damn it, young Master Shen, you're playing with your life, and you're playing with our lives too." Seeing this, Shenlang stared at him intently and retorted, "Madman Lan, don't you pride yourself on your brilliant talent? How can you lack the confidence to even make it into the top 3 of the capital's examination?" Hearing this, Madman Lan said sheepishly, "I am a man of great learning. Placing in the top 3 is naturally not a problem, but my 10 brothers can't do it. Look at them. They can't even stand up straight, let alone practice martial arts. To train them to the level of passing the military examination in just 1 month is harder than ascending to heaven." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Jing at his side grew anxious. He immediately stood up and asked, "Master Lan, stop joking. Can you do it or not? Give me a straight answer." Hearing this, Madman Lan quickly replied, "Of course I can. 5th Highness, please be at ease. I will go and discuss countermeasures with them right now." With that, before Ning Jing could speak again, he stood up and hurried out of the study. Watching Madman Lan's departing figure, Ning Jing couldn't help but frown. "Why do I feel this fellow is so unreliable?" Shenlang took a sip of tea and then smiled. "Your Highness, rest assured, I will make them reliable." An hour later, Madman Lan and his group were thrown unceremoniously before Shenlang by Wu Lai. Wu Lai then reported, "This Madman Lan was trying to sneak out the back door with his men when they were caught by the patrolling sisters, so they were apprehended and brought back." At this moment, seeing that escape was hopeless, Madman Lan immediately threw himself forward, hugged Shenlang's leg, and wailed, "Lord Shen, we really can't do it, and we really don't dare. We're just trying to make a living. I can't let my brothers follow me to their deaths. I beg you to be merciful and let us go." At this point, Ning Zheng, standing to the side, was already trembling with anger at his behavior. "Madman Lan, you were the one who boasted of having world-shaking talent, and now you're the one leading the escape. You're a homeless beggar, yet Shenlang and I value you so much. Not only do you not cherish this, but you treat us like fools." The more he thought about it, the more disappointed he became, and he shouted, "Enough. You can't force a melon to be sweet. Since you are unwilling to stay, I won't force you. You may leave." Hearing Ning Zheng's words, Madman Lan was overjoyed and kowtowed repeatedly in thanks. However, just as he got up to leave, he was grabbed by the collar by Wu Lai, dragged back, and thrown face down at Shenlang's feet once more. Shenlang, who had been silent all this time, slowly spoke, "Madman Lan, no one cares if you want to play the fool, but don't forget, you're already in your 30s. If you don't find a backer soon, do you think you'll still be able to protect them in a few years?" Hearing this, Madman Lan broke down in despair. "Young Master Shen, please let me go. I admit I was just boasting before. I've only read many miscellaneous and leisure books, but I've never had a proper education, let alone any training for the imperial examinations. The examinations in the capital are already perilous. I probably can't even pass the county-level exam, let alone the provincial one. And you're demanding I be in the top 3. You could kill me and I still couldn't do it. And my 10 crippled brothers, they can't even stand up straight. How could they possibly become military graduates in just 1 month? month. Listening to Madman Lan's pitiful words, Ning Jing sighed in frustration. Shenlang, why don't we just let it go? Why must we force him? However, Shenlang remained expressionless, looking at Madman Lan unmoved. He took a book from his robes, threw it in front of him, then leaned in and said coldly, Madman Lan, listen carefully. I'm giving you only the time it takes for one incense stick to burn to memorize this 5,000-word essay. If you fail, I'll have you castrated. As his voice fell, Madman Lan looked at him in terror and stammered, Young Master Shen, please don't make such jokes. People can really die. However, Shenlang completely ignored him and directly shouted, Wu Lai, light the incense. Bring the blade. Upon receiving the order, Wu Lai, without a word, drew her curved blade and held it to Madman Lan's groin. Seeing that Shenlang was serious, the man dared not delay any longer and hastily picked up the book and began to read. Ning Jing couldn't help but break into a cold sweat for Madman Lan. This 5,000-character essay was obscure and difficult to understand. Even a genius would probably need a full day to memorize it, yet Shenlang had only given him the time it takes for one incense stick to burn. How was that possible? However, at this moment, Madman Lan, in his extreme terror, seemed to have entered a different state entirely. His eyes were blank, his mind was racing, and his hands were rapidly turning the pages of the book. When the incense stick finally burned out, Shenlang stood up, walked over to him, snatched the book from his hands, and said coldly, Start reciting now. As his voice fell, Madman Lan began to recite like a recording machine. The lesser cause, its presence does not necessitate, its absence necessitates not, as if it has a beginning. The greater cause, its presence necessitates not, as if seeing is forming a perception. Listening to Madman Lan recite clearly and quickly, Ning Jing, following along with the book, was utterly stunned. He hadn't missed a single word. Was this man human? How on earth did he manage to memorize so much content in such a short time? However, a moment later, just as Madman Lan finished reciting the last sentence, Shenlang casually threw out several difficult arithmetic problems, regardless of addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division, and no matter how many digits the numbers had. As soon as Shenlang finished stating the problem, Madman Lan would give the correct answer within 5 seconds at most. Watching their interaction, Ning Jing, who was behind them, was completely shocked. How on earth did Shenlang find such a peerless genius? After the test was over, Madman Lan said pitifully, Young Master Shen, can I go change my pants? Shenlang, smelling the foul air, waved his hand in disgust, and only then did Wu Lai take him away. A quarter of an hour later, in the study, Madman Lan once again knelt before Shenlang. Young Master Shen, although I have a photographic memory, I have never had a proper education and know nothing about the imperial examinations. It's truly impossible for me to take the exams. I will definitely fail. Shenlang smiled. The civil examination mainly tests essays and poetry. I have prepared over 1,000 essays and several thousand poems. With your ability, memorizing them in over a month is no problem at all. As for whether you can guess the exam questions, you don't need to worry. You're not Jin Mutsong. You're a genius. If you can memorize over 1,000 essays, can't you learn to write one by imitation? Haven't you heard the saying, after reading 300 Tang poems, one can compose poetry even without trying? At these words, Jin Mutsong, who was copying books in the background, looked at the two with a resentful expression. Just talk about the matter. Why bring me into it as a comparison? Shenlang ignored him, his face suddenly turning cold as he looked at Madman Lan. His tone became a few degrees colder as he asked, Madman Lan, can you or can you not memorize 1,000 essays within a month? As he spoke, his gaze deliberately swept over his crotch. Madman Lan flinched at his fierce gaze and stammered in reply, yes, no problem. Shenlang continued to ask, then after memorizing 1,000 essays, can you skillfully adapt them to write an excellent essay on any given topic? Madman Lan pondered for a moment before gritting his teeth. Writing an article that is once in a century might be impossible, but dealing with the imperial examination should be no problem. Young Master Shen, I can do it, but my brothers can't. Practicing martial arts is not about rote memorization. Without a decade of foundation, one can't achieve anything. Hearing this, Shenlang raised an eyebrow, turned, and called out behind him, Big Fool, have you ever learned archery? The bewildered Big Fool shook his head. No, I haven't. Getting his answer, Shenlang stood up and walked out with Madman Lan, instructing Wu Lai as he went, Sister, please place a lit candle for us 200 meters away. A moment later, after all preparations were complete, Shenlang pointed ahead and said to Big Fool, take this bow and arrow, mimic the archery posture of the Chan cavalry, and extinguish the candle over there. Hearing this, Big Fool nodded, casually raised the bow, knocked an arrow, and released the string with barely any aim. The moment the candle flame was extinguished, Madman Lan's jaw nearly dropped. Was he really untrained? At that moment, Shenlang came over and explained, in the world of martial arts, up to a certain level, bloodline talent can overwhelm everything. Madman Lan, what kind of bloodline do your brothers have? Surely you must know. Madman Lan looked at Shenlang with a feigned confusion and said, Young Master Shen, I really don't know. Seeing that this fellow was still playing dumb even after he had been so direct, Shenlang's face darkened. If you truly knew nothing, would you have spent over a decade finding them and gathering them one by one to protect them? As his voice fell, Madman Lan instantly panicked, his words becoming incoherent. I don't know anything. Shenlang glanced at him sideways and continued continued, "Alright, you don't have to play dumb with me. These people are actually martial arts geniuses just like Lan Bao and Ku Tuhuan. The only difference is that they were adopted by noble families, while the ones by your side became beggars. Because the bloodline within them was suppressed and couldn't be released, their bones became deformed, and they've wasted half their lives like this." Hearing this, Madman Lan instantly became dejected. "They're already cripples now. It's useless to say anything." Seeing this, Shenlang patted his shoulder and said, "It may not be too late. Anything is possible. For now, you just focus on memorizing essays and poems and preparing for the imperial examination. As for your brothers, leave it to me to find a way to activate the bloodline within them. Don't worry, in a month, I will have you create a miracle that will shock the entire Yu kingdom." Madman Lan nodded. Then, as if remembering something, he suddenly asked, "Are we still missing one person? Shouldn't there be a leader of 1,000 households officer position?" Hearing this, Shenlang's gaze deepened as he looked into the distance. "It's just that this person is currently facing a calamity. If he can survive it, he will become an invincible commander. But if he cannot, we can only pretend he never existed." At this moment, in a pavilion by the New River, Shui Xiaoyan was waiting for the arrival of the great bandit Ku Tuhuan. As her gaze swept over the poison wine on the stone table, a slight ripple stirred in her heart, not out of affection, of course, but at the thought that even though Ku Tuhuan was a peerless martial artist, he had always been like an obedient, loyal dog by her side. It was a pity that as an assassin, he was too soft-hearted, which had caused the crown prince to completely lose patience with him. Just as her thoughts reached this point, Ku Tuhuan's figure appeared outside the pavilion. Seeing him, Shui Xiaoyan quickly picked up the wine cup, walked forward, and said softly, "Brother, you've had a long journey. The weather is hot. Quickly drink a cup of fruit wine to quench your thirst." Hearing this, Ku Tuhuan removed his mask and, without any suspicion, took the wine cup and drank it in one gulp. After putting down the cup, Ku Tuhuan lowered his head and reported with extreme guilt, "Sister Yan, I'm sorry. I've disappointed you again." Shui Xiaoyan feigned anger. "Brother Zhuo, do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused me by failing to kill Jin Zhuo and then just leaving?" Seeing her anger, Ku Tuhuan hurriedly explained that Jin Zhuo is a man of noble character and integrity. "I really couldn't bring myself to do it." At these words, Shui Xiaoyan couldn't help but sneer. "So you're saying he is a man of noble character, and I am a despicable person? That's absolutely not what I mean." Ku Tuhuan was so anxious he became incoherent. Unexpectedly, the moment he spoke these words, he suddenly felt a warmth gush from his mouth and nose. In his alarm, he hastily covered them with his hand. However, when he lowered his hand and saw the black blood in his palm, he finally realized what had happened. In despair, he asked unwillingly, "You actually poisoned me? I gave everything for you. I was even willing to die for you, and now you want to kill me? Was your love for me all a lie?" Hearing this, a sneer appeared on Zhu Xiaoyan's lips. "Of course it was a lie. You're just a lowly war orphan. How could a noble lady like myself ever be interested in you? My father only took you in as an adopted son because he saw your talent in martial arts. Did you really think you were worthy of being my brother? You were just an obedient dog at my feet." Hearing her heart-wrenching words, Ku Tuhuan was struck as if by lightning, and tears of bitter resentment instantly streamed from his eyes. He roared in question, "Shui Xiaoyan, you liar. Why use poison? Why not just use a sword to settle things with me? Kill me. I won't dodge." "As you wish." Before he could finish speaking, a flash of a sword appeared, and a sharp blade had already pierced his heart. Ku Tuhuan stared blankly at the woman he had loved his entire life. Even as the sharp sword was pulled out, he still couldn't believe her heartlessness. However, Shui Xiaoyan simply said coldly, "Go die, you useless trash," and kicked him into the churning New River. The river waters surged, quickly swallowing his figure. Watching the direction in which Ku Tuhuan was swept away, a cruel smile appeared on Shui Xiaoyan's face. "The most worthless thing in this world is a brainless martial artist. I hope you learn to be smarter in your next life." A moment later, 20 miles downstream on the New River, the Sword King, Li Qianqiu, was steering a raft in the middle of the river. At that moment, Ku Tuhuan's barely visible body was about to sink completely to the riverbed. Li Qianqiu immediately threw out a rope and pulled him from the river. Looking at Ku Tuhuan's cold body on the raft, Li Qianqiu was now in a difficult position. But then he thought, Shenlang had said he wanted to see him, dead or alive, so he would take him back first. With this thought, he picked up Ku Tuhuan's body, leaped ashore, and ran quickly towards the capital. At the same time, in the capital, Shenlang was facing condemnation from all the scholars of the city, just because the sovereign had agreed to let Shenlang's 11 homeless beggars participate in the imperial examinations. These scholars had caused a huge uproar in the city. The matter not only caused a stir among the common people but also in the court, where officials continuously submitted memorials to impeach Shenlang and Ningjing every day. Shenlang's recruitment of beggars into Ningjing's marquee was already seen as a great act of rebellion, an insult to the nation's dignity. Now, to let those beggars participate in the special examination was, in the eyes of the scholars, a defilement of the dignity of the sages. And the sovereign, while appearing to be perfunctory about the matter, always brushing it off with "we will discuss this matter later," was in fact cursing Shenlang to hell in his heart. "You little monster, look at what you've done. You've gone into hiding, but you've left me to be berated in court every day. It's infuriating." Little did he know, Shenlang had not been hiding from the storm these past few days. He had been holed up day and night in a deep, dark underground secret chamber, concentrating on experiments with blood and cursed bugs. After thousands of repeated attempts and countless sleepless nights, he was now only one step away from a breakthrough. Late at night 2 days later, as Shenlang was sleeping with little Bing in his arms, Wu Lai suddenly reported softly from outside the door, "Young master, the Sword King has returned." Hearing this, Shenlang quietly got up, went out, and followed Wu Lai to the secret chamber. A moment later, in the secret chamber, looking at Ku Tuhuan's corpse, Shenlang couldn't help but frown. Li Qianqiu said from the side, "Young Master Shen, the situation is a bit strange. Although he has long been without a heartbeat and breath due to poisoning, I have been carrying him for several days, yet there is not a single sign of decay on his body." After listening to the Sword King's description, Shenlang's interest was piqued. He then took out a silver needle and inserted it into Ku Tuhuan's body. After pulling it out, he placed the poison bloodstained needle into the mouth of a foolish-looking roe deer. But the next second, the poor creature bled from all 7 orifices and fell dead. Seeing this, Shenlang's brows furrowed even tighter. Just a trace of poisoned blood could kill such a large deer. Yet Ku Tuhuan had drunk a whole cup of poison wine. In the sword wound on his chest, Shenlang immediately activated his X-ray vision and performed a full-body scan of Ku Tuhuan, making an unexpected discovery. The man's heart was actually on the right side. Not only was the orientation of his heart different from that of ordinary people, but all his internal organs were displaced. It's likely that if his bloodline talent hadn't been noticed by the master of the Sky's End Sea Pavilion, Zhuo Xi, who then took him as his final disciple, this man would not only have a scarred face but might have become a monster with mutated bones like that group of beggars. At this moment, Li Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, "Young Master Shen, he has been dead for so many days. Can he still be revived?" Shenlang did not answer immediately. From his observation, although Ku Tuhuan appeared to have been dead for many days, there was a very special energy in his blood that was maintaining his brain function. In a sense, he had not truly died yet. This kind of bloodline is truly heaven-defying. After some thought, he said, "Wu Lai, go get my reagents." A moment later, Shenlang held a test tube and said to Li Qianqiu, "For now, we can only treat a dead horse as if it were a live one. Although I'm not completely confident, with the addition of his own bloodline power, I believe there's an 80% chance of bringing him back to life." Shenlang had managed to develop a regenerative energy source capable of modifying the human bloodline in just 6 months under limited conditions. Initially, his only goal was to remove the cursed poison implanted in the goddess Shuiyan's body by Floating Mountain. However, during his research, he discovered that after these cursed bugs devoured the golden bloodline of Big Fool, they would continuously secrete new bloodline energy, and their rate of division increased by more than 10-fold. However, what troubled him was that even after months of cultivation, he still couldn't remove the neurotoxins from the cursed bugs. It was not until a chance opportunity, when Shenlang, on a whim, experimented by mixing the Sword King's wife's blood with the cursed bugs, that he unexpectedly discovered she also had cursed bugs in her body. Even more surprisingly, the cursed bugs in her body could mix and reproduce with the newly cultivated ones, and their offspring were completely non-toxic. This news immediately filled Shenlang with joy. To verify the experiment's effectiveness, he secretly found several death row inmates who had committed heinous crimes. However, the results were tragic. The bodies of these ordinary people could not withstand the energy of Big Fool's golden bloodline. Almost instantly after entering their bodies, the cursed bugs sucked them dry. Just as Shenlang was at a loss, Madman Lan and his beggar brothers happened to join him. Due to the long-term suppression of their bloodlines, the bones of these beggars had become different from ordinary people, making them ideal test subjects. However, with the precedent of the death row inmates, he couldn't bring himself to use them for experiments directly. Now, looking at Ku Tuhuan's body in a state of suspended animation, Shenlang was thrilled. What a perfect test subject. Without delay, he plunged the syringe filled with the cursed bug energy liquid into Ku Tuhuan's heart. "Ku Tuhuan, the final step of this bloodline activation and transformation experiment is up to you. Success or failure, life or death, we'll leave it all to fate." However, after a quarter of an hour, Ku Tuhuan still showed no reaction. Li Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, "Shenlang, will this method of yours really work?" Shenlang did not reply, but with a grave expression, he activated his X-ray vision and began to observe Ku Tuhuan's meridians. Strange, they are clearly multiplying very actively inside his body, so why is he still not reacting at all? However, at that very moment, a powerful heartbeat suddenly rang out. Shenlang and Li Qianqiu were stunned by the sudden movement before them. Half a minute later, they both let out cries of joyous surprise. It worked. Ku Tuhuan is alive. At this moment, the happiest person should be Li Qianqiu. After all, the success of Shenlang's research meant there was hope for curing the poison in his wife's body. After the joy subsided, Shenlang looked at Li Qianqiu and asked, "Senior, where do you think this cursed bug from Floating Mountain came from? Was it really cultivated by them?" Li Qianqiu shook his head. "As far as I know, they excavated it from the ancient world." Shenlang fell silent. Qiu Yaoer had once told him that in his search for ancient ruins, the masters Zhuo Xi had abandoned even the Sky's End Sea Pavilion and traveled overseas with her master. The demonic monk from the Great Calamity Temple had also mentioned that they too expended a great deal of manpower and resources resources each year in search of traces of ancient civilizations. What kind of place was this mysterious ancient world? Just as Shenlang was lost in thought, Li Qianqiu suddenly spoke up. About what time will this Ku Tuhuan wake up? Shenlang thought for a moment and replied, given his current condition, he should wake up within 3 days. Time flew, and Ku Tuhuan had spent 3 days in a deep sleep. During these days, the cursed bugs in his body continuously repaired his damaged physique, while his consciousness was trapped in an endless nightmare. In his dream, his soul seemed to have returned to the past. He saw his younger self fleeing to the Yu Kingdom as a refugee, and later being adopted by the Zhuo family due to his martial arts talent. After that, his so-called adoptive father, besides forcing him to practice martial arts daily, forbade him from learning to read and constantly instilled in him one sentence: your life was given to you by the Zhuo family. Therefore, for your entire life, you must be loyal to the Zhuo family. Just as his mental state was on the verge of collapse, the eldest daughter of the family, Zhuo Xiaoyan, who had never given him a second glance, suddenly appeared before him like an angel. The sweet smile and concerned words of the young Zhuo Xiaoyan instantly captivated the young boy. Later, when the Zhuo clan was massacred, he went on a rampage to protect Zhuo Xiaoyan, even willingly becoming a sharp blade in her hand to climb the ladder of power. But he never expected that it was all a facade. The young Zhuo Xiaoyan was so manipulative, playing with his emotions as she pleased, and in that instant, he snapped his eyes open. He's awake. After 5th Prince Ningjing saved Consort Bian with his own blood, Consort Bian intended to propose to the sovereign that he be adopted as her son. Ningjing, already embroiled in the struggle for succession, could only grit his teeth and decline Consort Bian's kind offer, fearing it would implicate the Ka family. But after that, he would visit Consort Bian in the inner palace every few days, and their relationship had become as close as mother and son. On this day, Ningjing, as usual, came to the inner palace to dine with Consort Bian. At the dining table, Consort Bian suggested with a worried expression, Jinger, there are only about 30 days left until the special imperial examination. Should I send a great Confucian scholar to your mansion to teach that madman Lan? Even if it's a last-minute effort, it's better than turning in a blank paper in the examination hall. Hearing this, Ningjing respectfully bowed and expressed his gratitude. Thank you for your kindness, Mother Consort, but Shenlang said that he will handle all the teaching and that I am not to interfere. Upon hearing this, Consort Bian couldn't help but twitch her lips. This is too absurd. That boy Shenlang, his own status as a provincial graduate was tricked from his majesty, and now he dares to guide others for the imperial examinations? After a pause, she continued, by the way, aren't the other 10 people also participating in the military examination? Surely Shenlang won't be teaching them things like horse riding and archery himself? At these words, an image of the dozen or so cripples in his own mansion who couldn't even draw a bow instantly appeared in Ningjing's mind, and he lowered his head in shame. He was too embarrassed to discuss these people with his mother Consort. Sensing Ningjing's embarrassment, Consort Bian comforted him gently. I don't know what that little rascal Shenlang is up to. I still suggest you don't get involved in the struggle for succession. With your status, you can do whatever you want later on. Isn't it good to live a peaceful and safe life? Hearing this, Ningjing lowered his eyes and said nothing. Consort Bian couldn't help but sigh. She then turned to the eunuch beside her and asked, it's so late. Has His Majesty not finished with the memorials yet? Hearing Consort Bian's question, Ningjing knew full well why the sovereign wasn't coming. He hurriedly stood up and said, Mother Consort, I have finished eating. I still have some matters to attend to at my mansion, so I will take my leave now and come to visit you again in a few days. Seeing this, Consort Bian wanted to keep him a little longer, but she ended up smiling and agreeing. After all, everyone knew that even though Ningjing had performed a meritorious service this time, the sovereign still disliked him. Otherwise, he wouldn't find all sorts of excuses to avoid him every time he knew he was coming. Sure enough, just as Ningjing left, the sovereign hurried in. My dear consort, I have kept you waiting. I had too many memorials today, which caused a delay. Has Zhenger already left? Hearing the sovereign's excuse, Consort Bian couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. In fact, she had just sent someone to the study to check. He had been holding a 200-character memorial in his hand for half an hour without putting it down. It would probably take some time for His Majesty to truly accept Zhenger. She stood up and said, Your Majesty, I will go to the small kitchen to prepare some food for you now. Meanwhile, Ku Tuhuan, who had just woken up from a nightmare, was lying in bed, gasping for breath. At this moment, he had not yet recovered from the painful nightmare. After a long while, he managed to prop himself up, looking at the empty room in a daze. Where am I? Didn't I die? He then instinctively leaped out of bed. The moment he landed, he was shocked by how light his body felt. What was going on? How had his body become so nimble? The pain that had tormented him for years had also vanished. Just as he was marveling at the changes in his body, he inadvertently glanced at a mirror nearby and was once again stunned. My heavens, who is this handsome man in the mirror? Is it me? In his excitement, he touched his face and said emotionally, What on earth did Shenlang do to me? Not only did he save my life, but he also restored my skin to normal. He is simply godlike. For years, Ku Tuhuan had been silently enduring both physical and mental torment, but now, the shackles that had bound him for 20 long years were finally broken. From the moment Zhuo Xiaoyan poisoned him, he owed the Zhuo family nothing more. He then quickly dressed and headed for the door. He had to go and thank Shenlang. Ku Tuhuan Kutuhuan should be called by his real name, Shui Chen, and was now completely reborn. Stepping out of the room, the warm but not scorching autumn sun shone down on him. The noise from the square across the courtyard interrupted his thoughts. As he got closer, he could see several bald men with deformed bones struggling with bows and arrows. Seeing this, Shui Chen's heart filled with contempt. Do these guys even know how to practice martial arts? The bows in their hands could probably be drawn easily even by a child. Just as he was thinking, the men began to fall over one after another, complaining, "Yes, today was really tough. These days, people who train as hard as we do are rare. How about we change our training schedule? Train for a quarter of an hour and rest for an hour and a half." Hearing these words, Shui Chen, who was extremely strict with martial arts training, instantly flew into a rage. These guys were so unmotivated. If they were his soldiers, he would have disciplined them all. Just then, Shenlang and Ning Jing walked over. However, these 10 useless individuals showed no fear at all, still lying on the ground and making sarcastic remarks to them. Shenlang and Ning Jing seemed to have long grown accustomed to their behavior, walking right through the middle of them without a second glance. After reaching Shui Chen, they smiled and said, "Brother Zhuo, you're finally awake." Faced with Shenlang's familiar tone, Shui Chen was suddenly at a loss. Not long ago, he had been ordered to assassinate Shenlang's father-in-law, but now Shenlang had become his savior. How was he supposed to face him? However, just as he was feeling awkward, Shenlang suddenly gave him a light punch on the chest and said, "Previously, you were ordered to assassinate my ex-wife, Su Chanqian, but you deliberately let her go. I owe you a favor for that. A few days ago, you went to assassinate my father-in-law, but I know you were also misled. This punch is your repayment to me, and we'll consider the matter closed." Hearing Shenlang's words, Shui Chen was stunned. Doesn't everyone say that Shenlang is narrow-minded and vengeful? Yet he's letting go of something as major as the attempted murder of his father? Before he could react, Shenlang suddenly moved closer, his tone laced with cunning. "Be so serious. Now that you've seen the true face of that venomous woman, Zhuo Zhaoyan, I'm sure you've made your decision. You must have heard the news that I'm recruiting followers for the Fifth Highness. Now I want to recruit you to serve under the Fifth Highness. Are you willing to join me in assisting the Fifth Highness to ascend the throne and achieve great things?" Shui Chen lifted his head and said with a determined tone, "Shenlang, I agree." With that, he turned and knelt before Ning Jing. "Your servant, Shui Chen, pays respects to my lord. I hereby swear that as long as my lord does not fail me, I will remain forever loyal and never betray you." Shenlang was very satisfied with his decision. Shui Chen was a legendary figure in the Yu Kingdom. At 18, he became the top military scholar, and at 19, due to his special bloodline, he went to study at the Sky's End Sea Pavilion, excelling in martial arts, classics, mathematics, and philosophy. After becoming the great bandit Kutuhuan, he led his 200 elite followers, moving unhindered through the kingdoms of Wu and Yu as if it were their own backyard. Though they were called bandits, they never plundered from the common people, only targeting wealthy and unscrupulous aristocratic families, so it wouldn't be an overstatement to call them a highly honorable army. With this in mind, Shenlang bowed to Ning Jing and said, "Congratulations, Your Highness, on gaining such an invincible warrior. Coincidentally, the mansion is currently lacking a leader of 1,000 households, so why not have Brother Zhuo take up this post?" Then, he looked at Shui Chen. Would Brother Zhuo be willing to accept the position of leader of 1,000 households in the mansion? Hearing this, Shui Chen agreed without a second thought, but then added, "Your Highness, I have 200 followers under my command. I wonder if they can join the mansion with me." At these words, Ning Jing was overjoyed. "Of course, you can, and all 200 of them can serve as your personal guards, under your full command." After thanking the Fifth Highness, Shui Chen looked at Shenlang and said, "Young Master Shen, later I will write a secret letter and have someone deliver it to Daluo Island in the eastern waters of the Yu Kingdom. Someone will be there to receive it. Once they see the token and the secret letter, they will set off for the capital immediately." Hearing the name Daluo Island, Shenlang was taken aback. This was a remote and deserted island. If classified according to modern Earth's geography, its location would be in international waters, right? No wonder the kingdoms of Wu and Yu had expended so much manpower and resources yet failed to find Kutuhuan's base. Just as he was pondering, Shui Chen had already started writing the letter beside him. Shenlang was about to step forward to look at the contents of the letter when he was surprised to find that he couldn't recognize a single character on the paper. Shenlang couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "Could it be that you created all these strange characters yourself?" Hearing this, Shui Chen smiled. "That's right, we use our own created script for secret communications within our team. However, these characters are just codes. They need to be deciphered after being received." At these words, both Shenlang and Ning Jing were stunned. They were just a band of 200 bandits, yet they had created such a high-level method of secrecy. This was simply using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. At that moment, Shui Chen stood up, handed the secret letter to Shenlang, and asked, "Your Highness, shouldn't I have 10 leader of 100 households officers under my command? I wonder where they are now." Shenlang smiled and pointed behind him. "They're over there." Following his gesture, he saw the 10 good-for-nothings lying scattered on the ground, basking in the sun, with one even picking his feet. Seeing this, Shui Chen's composure almost shattered. "What the hell? It's them. Young Master Shen, are you joking with me? These misfits can't even be described as useless anymore. They're practically dregs." Finally, he couldn't help but ask, "Young Master Shen, did you make make a mistake? Or are you testing me? Shenlang shook his head and smiled. Of course not. Not only are these 10 guys the leader of 100 households officers of our mansion, but I also need you to ensure they all pass the military examination in 38 days. As his voice fell, Shui Chen's whole being went into shock. He had to repay Shenlang's life-saving grace, but this request was something he couldn't achieve even if he were killed 100 times. In battle, even if you don't have a sharp sword, a wooden stick will do. But what's the deal with being given 10 piles of crap? However, Shenlang was not at all surprised by his reaction. He stepped forward and smiled. Brother Zhua, don't jump to conclusions so quickly. Why don't you go and observe them carefully first? You might find something unexpected. Hearing Shenlang's words, Shui Chen, filled with curiosity, walked over to the group. After looking around, he randomly pulled one person and pushed him to the ground. He then grabbed the man's foot, brought it to his nose to sniff, and then began to knead it in his hands. This sudden action terrified everyone. The man who was grabbed struggled and shouted, "Are you a pervert? What are you doing grabbing my foot in broad daylight?" However, before he could finish speaking, with a smack, Shui Chen kicked him away with a whip-like leg, sending him flying and landing face first on the ground in the distance. At that moment, Shenlang approached and asked, "Brother Zhua, did you see anything?" Shui Chen nodded. "You're right, I smelled a familiar scent on them. If I'm not mistaken, these guys, like me before, have powerful bloodlines that haven't been activated and released. They continuously absorb the primordial energy of heaven and earth, leading to an accumulation of excessive power that has caused their bodies to become twisted." Hearing this, Shenlang's expression brightened. "Then if I can successfully activate the bloodline within them, what kind of result do you think will occur?" Shui Chen thought for a moment and said, "These 10 individuals have been absorbing the primordial energy of heaven and earth for at least 20 years. If their bloodlines can be successfully activated, they will instantly possess immense power. Right now, everyone in the capital is watching us. Tomorrow, I will take them to a remote place to activate their bloodlines." Unexpectedly, Shui Chen proposed, "Young Master Shen, could you please postpone taking them for 2 days?" Shenlang was taken aback. "Why is that?" Shui Chen explained, "Their bodies are currently deeply crippled. Although they seem to laugh and jest daily, their hearts are filled with despair. But once their bloodlines are activated, turning them into normal people with power far exceeding the ordinary, their mindset will completely change. Right now, while they are still in despair, is the time to instill discipline in them. Only through an unforgettable ordeal can they be made to remember this for the rest of their lives." Shenlang suddenly understood. "Then how do you think they should be trained?" Shui Chen smiled slightly. "Beat them to death's door until they submit." After receiving approval, he turned and walked directly in front of the crowd, saying, "Hello, brothers. My name is Kui Chen, and I am your leader of 1,000 households. From now on, we will be in the same camp, sharing the same pot. I ask for your kind consideration." Hearing this, the slackers lying on the ground jeered impatiently. Don't worry, we'll definitely take care of you. Although you're the leader of 1,000 households, you don't have as much seniority as we do. Without our help, you won't be able to do your job as leader of 1,000 households, so you'd better be sensible from now on. You understand?" Hearing these words, a fierce look instantly appeared on Kui Chen's face. He then drew a whip from behind his back and sneered, "I will be sure to remember the teachings of my brothers." At these words, everyone was first taken aback. Before they could react, the whip in Kui Chen's hand lashed out like a venomous snake, causing them to cry out in pain one after another. At this moment, Kui Chen roared, "Get up, all of you, get up for me." After roaring, he lashed out with his whip again, sending those who tried to flee rolling on the ground. Some were in so much pain that they lay on the ground, begging for help. "Young Master Shen, save us. Fifth Highness, save us. If you keep hitting us, someone's going to die." However, these cries for help were all in vain. Shenlang stood not far away, watching with schadenfreude as these fellows were dealt with by Kui Chen. Finally, someone couldn't take it anymore and cried out that they were quitting. Hearing these words, Kui Chen stopped his whip, walked over, and asked coldly, "You wanna quit?" One of the bald men boldly shouted, "We came here to be officials, not to suffer. The Fifth Highness and the others haven't even bothered us. Yet you, a mere leader of 1,000 households, dare to lay a hand on us? Who do you think you are?" As his voice fell, Kui Chen just sneered at this, then grabbed the man and began dragging him backwards. "You useless trash, listen carefully. According to the laws of the dynasty, quitting in the army is considered desertion. By military order, all deserters are to be hanged." The bald man truly panicked, his voice starting to tremble. "Brother, are you serious?" However, Kui Chen completely ignored his pleas for mercy, dragged the man straight to a tree, picked up a prepared noose. He kicked the bald man's knee sharply, and with a dull thud, the bald man's body was instantly suspended in the air. As the bald man's struggles on the rope grew weaker, the other 9, seeing this, charged at Kui Chen in a rage. "You dare to kill someone. Brothers, let's get him." However, Kui Chen, with a calm expression, lifted his leg and executed a series of shadowless kicks, instantly sending the men flying several tens of meters away, with some even crashing through a wall. At this moment, he looked coldly at the fallen men and said, "You bunch of losers, you can't even protect yourselves, yet you want to save someone else? What a pipe dream." At this point, the bald man hanging from the tree was gradually becoming still, his tongue lolling out further and further. Ning Zheng, unable to bear it any longer, stepped forward and pleaded, "Leader of 1,000 households Ku, considering this is his first offense, I ask you to spare his life. life. At these words, the 9 bruised and battered good-for-nothings rushed forward, knelt on the ground, and wailed, "Leader of 1,000 households, Commander, you are a man of great magnanimity. We beg you to spare our brother's life. If you don't let him down soon, he'll really die." However, Kui-Chen coldly uttered 4 words, "Military law is merciless." Hearing this, Ning Zheng's face showed his difficulty. He then bowed to Kui-Chen and said, "Leader of 1,000 households, Ku, I recruited them. It was my failure to discipline them that led them to say such outrageous things about quitting. But as the saying goes, in education, there are no class distinctions. We must not punish without first teaching." However, Kui-Chen retorted, "I disagree. Since they have joined my army, they should be aware of the authority of military law. How can they evade punishment with the excuse of not being taught? As their leader of 1,000 households, it is my duty to train them and enforce the law. Even if your highness is the master, you should not interfere too much." Hearing this, Ning Zheng suddenly took out a dagger, cut his own hair, and then said, "Leader of 1,000 households, Ku, I, Ning Zheng, as the 5th prince of the imperial family, offer my hair in place of his head. How about we trade it for this leader of 100 households' life?" Seeing this, Kui-Chen said no more, took the dagger, leaped up, and cut the rope. After the bald man fell to the ground, he warned coldly, "Remember, your life was exchanged for by the 5th highness." Just then, Shen Lang, who had come forward to check on the situation, suddenly exclaimed, "Oh no, this guy has no heartbeat. Leader of 1,000 households, Ku, I'll direct you. You perform CPR on him." Immediately, Kui-Chen quickly began resuscitation efforts under Shen Lang's guidance, even disregarding the foul smell from the bald man's mouth to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Seeing this, Shen Lang couldn't help but admire him in his heart. This guy is truly ruthless. To be able to go so far is truly admirable. A quarter of an hour later, the bald man finally came to. Seeing this, his brothers were overjoyed and, despite their own injuries, cheered and celebrated. At this moment, Kui-Chen's stern voice rang out, "All of you, listen up. This time, it was the 5th highness's mercy, offering his hair in place of a head, that saved your life. But this is also the last time. If it happens again, you will all be executed without exception. Do you understand?" Having witnessed Kui-Chen's ruthlessness, the men immediately responded with a loud and obedient shout. Immediately after, Kui-Chen struck while the iron was hot, roaring again, "All of you, listen to my command. Stand at attention for 1 hour. Anyone who dares to move will face the wrath of my whip." However, 3 minutes later, these 10 men, whose bodies were already deformed, could no longer endure standing for so long and began to tremble all over. One of them even lost his footing and fell to the ground. Seeing this, Kui-Chen, without a word, drew his whip and lashed it fiercely at the fallen man. The bald man on the ground screamed in pain, "Leader of 1,000 households, Ku, spare me. My crippled leg really can't stand for that long." But even so, Kui-Chen's hand did not stop. At that moment, a man timidly called out from behind, "Leader of 1,000 households, Ku, I need to urinate." However, before he could finish his sentence, Kui-Chen turned his head and shot him a murderous glare. The man trembled all over, then sighed in resignation and said, "No need to go anymore. I've already taken care of it on the spot." Meanwhile, Shen Lang, who was watching the scene from a distance, couldn't help but marvel inwardly. Ku Tuhuan really has a knack for training soldiers. Although the military examination is approaching and activating the bloodlines of these 10 men is urgent, since he is so confident that it won't delay important matters, I will trust him. I can use these few free days to contact the Heavenly Path Society and arrange for the things needed for the military examination. 5 days later, these 10 crippled good-for-nothings, who originally couldn't even stand properly, were able to stand perfectly still for an hour under Kui-Chen's strict military training. The harshness of Kui-Chen's training in the past few days made even Shen Lang's hair stand on end. Shen Lang finally couldn't help but step forward and ask, "Brother Ichen, training soldiers has always been about combining kindness and severity to inspire both respect and fear. But now, I see that while these men fear you like a tiger, their hearts are filled more with deep-seated hatred." Hearing this, Kui-Chen explained, "Young Master Shen, you may not know, but kindness and respect are not easily earned in ordinary times. Only by sharing life and death on the battlefield, facing danger together, can they truly connect with one another. Simply providing food and clothing is a shallow way to win people over. It is neither profound nor memorable. At this stage, it is enough for them to fear and respect me, and not dare to disobey." At these words, Shen Lang immediately understood. He nodded and smiled. "In that case, I wonder when our subsequent plans can proceed." Kui-Chen cupped his hands and said, "Now that this group has achieved complete discipline, you can rest assured and take them to activate their bloodlines." As his voice fell, a slight smile appeared on Shen Lang's lips. "That's perfect. We can try out the 1,000-mile horses sent by the Heavenly Path Society." The Heavenly Path Society, a major financial family, was fully supporting Shen Lang. Although they were not optimistic about Ning Zheng's bid for the throne, they couldn't overcome their leadership's trust in Shen Lang's abilities. Therefore, when Shen Lang asked for their financial support for Ning Zheng, they agreed without a second thought. Recently, upon learning that Shen Lang needed horses, they immediately selected 25,000-mile horses worth over 20,000 gold coins and had them sent to Ning Zheng's mansion urgently. The next morning, on Vermilion Bird Avenue, the deafening sound of horse hooves startled the people who had come to the early market. They saw a dozen magnificent magnificent 1,000-mile horses, carrying the good-for-nothings who couldn't even sit up straight, galloping through the middle of the street. The sight of them being tied firmly to the horses' backs made all the onlookers stop in amazement. However, while the crowd was laughing, it was the people on horseback who were suffering. Riding for the first time, they were already scared out of their wits, but the thought of leader of 1,000 households Ku's ruthlessness made them swallow their fear, grit their teeth, and not even dare to utter a single groan. Seeing this, Kui-chen had no choice but to give the order. You don't need to hold it in. You can all scream as loud as you want. As his voice fell, the entire street erupted in a chorus of blood-curdling wails. Meanwhile, the sovereign, watching this farce from the palace walls, was about to go mad with anger. So embarrassing. Shenlang, you scoundrel, you've had your fun, but you've made me lose all face in the entire capital. For the next few days, the court sessions will likely be in turmoil again, and those censors will surely impeach me relentlessly over this. Shenlang, just you wait. He gritted his teeth and said, after the special imperial examination is over, I will definitely execute these good-for-nothings. And as for you, I will give you a good thrashing to vent my anger. After half a day of travel, Shenlang and his party arrived at a large lake 100 miles from the capital. Looking at the small island not far away, he felt a sense of relief. The Heavenly Path Society had indeed made excellent arrangements for him, placing them in the lakeside manor on the island. With the entire island as cover, who could possibly spy on what they were doing? However, he turned to look at the wailing good-for-nothings behind him and couldn't help but purse his lips. It seems he had overthought things. Who would bother spying on them in their current state? An hour later, in the underground secret chamber of the manor, the 10 good-for-nothings had been forcibly straightened and tied to beds by Wu Lai and other female generals. At this moment, not knowing what was about to happen, they were all trembling with fear. At this moment, Kui-chen's stern voice rang out, all of you, listen carefully. Whatever young Master Shin is about to do to you, none of you are to make a sound. Otherwise, you can all say goodbye to your tongues. As his voice fell, Shenlang walked over with a large, thick syringe. In fact, he himself was quite nervous at this moment. After all, out of all the experiments, only the one on Kui-chen had been successful. As for them, he didn't let himself think further, took a deep breath, and then stepped forward to inject the energy source into their bodies. Soon, all 10 doses of the potion had been administered. Shenlang began to watch their bodies closely for any changes. Within half a minute, the silent secret chamber was filled with the sound of heartbeats, one after another, like war drums. Then, their bodies began to tremble uncontrollably, and their skin started to tear at a visible rate, with blood splattering out in an instant. Yet, even in such pain, these men clenched their jaws and dared not make a sound. At this moment, Kui-chen gave the order, if it hurts, you don't need to endure it anymore. Let it all out. Before his voice had even faded, a series of heart-wrenching, blood-curdling screams filled the entire secret chamber. As they released their pain, Shenlang witnessed a horrifying scene. Their twisted and deformed bodies were being forcibly corrected. Not only that, but their surging blood vessels bulged like balloons, as if they would burst at any moment. As the heart-wrenching wails, thick with the smell of blood, washed over him, Shenlang suppressed his physical discomfort and activated his X-ray vision to examine the changes in their bones and meridians. Keep going. Hold on. This time, you are gambling with your lives for a transformation. It's either success or death. 2 days later, the excruciating pain, like bones being shattered and reassembled, a torment like being in hell every second, finally began to subside. Seeing this, Shenlang hurriedly went to check on their conditions one by one. Their wounds had begun to heal, and their breathing had stabilized. He then turned to Kui-chen and said, their bloodline breakthrough is going smoothly, but they are not like you. Their meridians will likely take longer to transform. You must watch them closely from now on and report any problems to me immediately. With that, he left the secret chamber. He had intended to go to the study to check on Madman Lan's memorization progress, but as soon as he entered, he was surprised by Madman Lan's serious demeanor. The man was not slacking off and sleeping, but was sitting quietly at the desk, chanting Buddhist scriptures. Seeing this, he walked over and said, Madman Lan, it seems you are very concerned about your brothers. Do you not trust me? Hearing Shenlang's question, Madman Lan hurriedly bowed and said, young master's abilities are clear for all to see. How could I have any doubt? Hearing this, Shenlang suddenly changed the subject and smiled. Madman Lan, can you tell me how you and your brothers met? Hearing Shenlang ask this question, a rare, serious, and happy smile appeared on Madman Lan's face as he slowly began to speak. Actually, we all grew up together. We lived with our respective parents in a deep mountain, leading a carefree life. It wasn't until a group of assassins appeared that our peaceful life was completely shattered. The adults were all tragically killed while trying to cover our escape, and we children were completely scattered as we fled in all directions. Actually, there were originally over 30 of us who escaped, but after so many years, I've only found these 10. I've never been able to find the rest. Hearing this, Shenlang fell into deep thought. A group of people with super strong bloodlines. Why would they gather and live in seclusion, farming in the deep mountains, and attract assassins to hunt them down? It seems the story behind Madman Lan and his group hides a significant secret.